Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I am an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. Check in the description notes if you want any more information about how to get my knitting patterns or how to hook up with me on social media. We are going to get straight to the point here today because, sometimes people complain that there is too much yada 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 at the beginning. And also, I just woke up and decided that I did not want to do my hair. So all you're going to see is my hands. Today we are going to be taking a look at troubleshooting uneven stitches. If you are a knitter who finds that your stitches tend to be too loose or too tight, or the stitches are of variable sizes, I'm going to give you 3 different things to think about that might help you identify where the issue might be. Now, if you don't have any problem with your stitches, if you're a loose knitter and you don't mind being a loose knitter, if you're a tight knitter, you don't mind being a tight knitter, I'm not telling you got to fix nothing. But this is for people who might want to troubleshoot and are unhappy with what they're currently achieving with their knitting technique. So the first thing we're going to talk about is making sure that you're tensioning your yarn. I'm just going to do a few stitches and then I'm going to talk about tensioning your yarn. I'll link to an entire video that's all it's about, but what I'm going to talk about now is tensioning the stitches. When you insert your needle, you wrap it with your yarn and pull it through. You need to make sure that you're pushing it all the way up onto the barrel of the needle before you drop that stitch. And you want to make sure that you're holding just enough tension to make that new yarn, the working yarn, conform to the shape and size of your knitting needle. This is why we use knitting needles that are different sizes. The size refers to, I don't know if it's the circumference or the diameter, but it's how big around this cylinder is. It's why we have little ones and big ones, it's telling you. And what it is when you properly tension your yarn, you're going to set the circumference of your stitch to that needle size. I have this needle, this is just a tip. It's bigger, it's a different color, it has different contrast, but it also, since it's multicolor, I hoped you could see it better. I'm talking about the part of the needle that is straight. You have the beginning part, which is the taper, and the part of the needle that is straight, and then we have another taper on this size that goes typically to your cable if you're working with a circular needle. This is the cylinder. This one is a 6mm or US size 10. That means that is the size your stitches are going to be if tensioned. I'm going to switch just so you see that it's the same thing if you are knitting with the yarn in your right hand. Again, you insert, wrap, pull it through, and then slide it up onto that cylinder before you take that stitch off. And I actually do a little bit of a tug just to make sure it's seated around there. Now what's going to happen, I'm going to go back because I am a continental knitter and trying to do this with my right hand is really challenging. If you just, and you see I'm holding the yarn at tension, if you just grab this and then kind of not even pay attention to that, it makes it really hard to pull through, but look, see how that's all. And if I just go along and I'm like do, oh, I'm totally missed that one. If I'm just tootling right along and not paying attention to see how, look, you can see the difference. See these stitches? See they're nice and snugged up? And see how these stitches have all that extra space in them? Well, if you're not really paying attention and sometimes you snug them and sometimes you don't snug them, or if your tension is, as I said, irregular, you're going to end up with irregular stitches. This is one of the reasons why you might be like, I can't get gauge. and I have to drop down needle sizes because my needle stitches are always too big. It's because you're not tensioning that yarn. So that is the first tip, which is making sure that you are working with your yarn under tension and you're properly tensioning it to the barrel of your yarn. Now, this is sort of a corollary, and the big thing is make sure you don't work on your taper. A lot of people will end up choking way down on their needles, and they're working from tip to tip like this. And so they're right up here and they're wrapping their yarn and they're only grabbing it with the tip, and then they just do that. And then they do that. So it's being tensioned around that taper, and then they force it up with their fingers. Again, because this is a taper, depending on where on this taper you have tensioned. Oh my goodness, my phone is cuts. Okay, that was exciting. Okay, so depending on where you are on this taper, you're going to get smaller or larger stitches. And if you're trying to knit and you find you're constantly having to push and your stitches are way too tight, it might be because you're working on the taper. And let me show you again what that would look like. So you're just way down here and you just barely stick your tip through and barely grab it, and then tension it somewhere along this. And if you do that several times, it's hard for me to do because, I have the muscle memory, but I'm trying to make sure you guys can see this. So it's like that. And once you get several stacked up right there on the tip, you're going to shove them up, and they're going to be they're way tighter. You're not going to really be able to see it like you were able to the loose ones. But what it is I can feel that these are tighter and kind of plastered down, and they won't move as easily. So you don't need to worry about it, but look at your knitting, and if your knitting is really tight, see if you are working on your taper. Again, I have this, because it's a different color and because it's fatter, I thought you could see the taper easier. So you have this whole area is not 6 millimeters. This goes down to tiny. So if you set your stitch size on here, you're not going to have 6 millimeter. And if you're setting it here sometimes, and here sometimes, and here sometimes, and here sometimes, you're going to end up with a variable stitch size. So that is another thing to troubleshoot that might be helpful, particularly if you find that your stitches are too tight. That might be the culprit. Now, the next one, again, falls into the difficult for me to demonstrate because of muscle memory, but I've seen people when I was teaching and when I'm working in a store, I've seen people who come in to do this. And what it is instead of, like with the taper, working way out on the tippy tips can be an issue. People who are afraid or worried about losing their stitches will work way down here on the barrel, and they insert their yarn and then they pull it off. You see how I did that? Insert yarn, pull it off. Insert yarn, pull it off. And you can see what that does to look how big that stitch is. And the one behind it. Again, this is going to give you, depending on how you yoink it, this is going to give you irregular stitch sizes. And not only that, by pulling that way, it's going to distort the stitch below it too. You can see right there that this one's smaller and this one's bigger. Here, and it can be done just as easily if the yarn is in your right hand, because again, you're working way down here and you just yoink it off. Using that needle to yoink that stitch off will end up with looser stitches and again, irregular stitches. if you go back and watch, or just, I can do it now, where I was doing it, you're like premium space. The space you should be working is right here, you know, at the top of the taper, but not way back here. And if you watch when I make a stitch, I wrap the yarn, I push the needle above it, and then I kind of use that needle to brush the new stitch off. See there, like that. Brush it off, as opposed to, let's go backwards a little bit, using the needle to pull the stitch off, because that is what's going to end up with irregularly shaped stitches. If you keep that, and I just pull it through, and it's still in contact here, and it's just sliding it off. And as you see, I pushed it all the way up with this one up to here. So this is kind of in a, like this kind of motion. Let me back off and see what I can do for my right hand tensioners. So if you push it through and wrap it again like that, and pushing it off like that and sweeping it off, that gives you the opportunity to tension it properly around the barrel and remove the stitch from the left hand to the right hand needle, and if you're a mirror knitter, in the opposite direction, without distorting this stitch. So the moral of this story is, most of the time, if you're having issues with irregular stitch sizes, it's a tensioning issue. Make sure you are tensioning the stitch around the barrel of your needle so you get that actual millimeter. B, make sure you're not working on the taper. And C, make sure you're not yoinking that stitch off. Make sure you're scooching or sliding that stitch off when you're transferring the new stitch onto your right hand needle. So that is what I've got for you today. If you have any more questions, or if you have any troubleshooting issues, please let me know in the comments. If you have any thoughts on this video, or anything that you've identified that causes you issues with this sort of thing, I would love to hear about it, because I always want to learn more. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, click that like button. And if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, please subscribe to my channel and select notifications. Thank you so much.